Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the fifth series of UnPACK Community Conversations. We're really excited to be in West Philadelphia at the Community Education Center on Lancaster Avenue. We'd like to start off this session just unpacking with you around COVID year one. And what we want to discuss today during this conversation is challenges, pivots, and recovery. I'd like to introduce our panelists, but before I do that, I would like to thank our sponsors of this program, who is PC Live Coalition, Life After Trauma Organization, and Mill Creek Community Partnership, with a host of other supporters, funders, and sponsors. So I'd like to start with my right. Mr. Lamont Twyne is our guest for this afternoon. Mr. Lamont Twyne has been a community leader in Philadelphia for 28 years and has lived in Philly almost his entire life. He tutors and connects with local youth and runs his own banquet business. Welcome this afternoon, Mr. Twyne.
Thank you so much for having me.
Next to Mr. Lamont Twyne, we have Pastor Evon DeLee. Pastor Evon is the pastor at the new church down the way. She is a community activist and trusted pillar of support for her communities, especially throughout the course of the pandemic. Good afternoon and welcome, Pastor Evon.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
To my left, we have Jeffrey Jordan. Jeffrey is a community outreach leader for Drexel's University programming in the West Philadelphia Promise neighborhood. He has helped to create and implement major community programming during the pandemic, including Jeffrey's Porch, which gives essentials to community leaders to distribute to their communities. Welcome, Mr. Jeffrey.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And on my far left, we have Shesheena Bray. Shesheena has been a clinician studying under Dr. Clara Willie Perkins at Laddo for 5 years now and is today's trauma expert for us. Shesheena is the director of programming for Me Too International, and she also runs her own private mental and emotional wellness practice. Welcome, Shesheena. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
So, as we move into our UnPACK conversation this afternoon, we'd like to start off with some topics that we would like to discuss. And so the idea is we'd like to hear from our panelists what were their personal and professional pivots that they had to do during this year of pandemic now that we're transitioning out of March. So starting with you, Ms. Shesheena, can you share with us some of your professional and personal pivots during the pandemic?
Yes. One, I've been using that word pivot so much this year because we've all been asked to pivot. We've all been asked to look at where we're at and figure out what makes the most sense in terms of moving forward. And so perhaps one of the largest pivots or biggest pivots for me was in my work. I never intended to be an online therapist. I greatly appreciated and understood the necessity of in-person communication. And so as a result of the pandemic, I went from seeing clients, seeing individuals and couples, going into schools, teaching mindfulness, to doing all of these things online. And so becoming the online therapist that I never thought I would become. And so initially there was a bit of resentment in that. I didn't want to work online. I didn't want to accept that this was now the norm. But in doing so, I also found some gifts. I found that some of my clients actually opened up more by being in this online context. I found that I was able to still make our work effective, to still make deep connection even online. And so while it was an uncomfortable pivot, it was definitely a necessary pivot. In my personal life, I would just say being home with my daughter more. Being home with my daughter more, and being teacher, being nurturer, being, good guy, bad guy, in all of those scenarios, but also really learning how to lean on family. That, we talk about trust, but what does it look like in action? And so allowing my family to support me and to support me with my daughter has been a great point of growth for me, and it's been a big pivot, I would say, since the pandemic.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Jeffrey, what about your pivots, being a community engagement specialist and being used to doing your work face-to-face also? Have there been personal and professional pivots for you?
Thank you, Cass. As you stated, I work for West Philadelphia Promise Neighborhood, and my job prior to COVID entailed me doing a lot of work with community organizations, going out into the community to meetings, to fairs, to festivals, and supporting the community. However, when COVID hit, the first thing happened was Drexel shut down our office at 36th and Market, and we had no place to operate out of. And even though our office was shut down, we saw a big need for the community members to have simple things such as masks and bleach and things like that. And we had nowhere to work out of. So all of a sudden, my house became a warehouse. And it's known nationally now as Jeffrey's Porch. And community leaders can come to my porch and get bleach to give to their neighbors or masks to give to the children. And it's just, it has been a big pivot in that my space is no longer just my space, but it's also part of Drexel University right now.
Yes, and so Pastor Evon, can you talk about what, we're certain that with the faith industry and the faith-based organization, that you've had many pivots that you had to deal with. Can you talk about that a little bit? And also, were there any stressors that made it worse for you? And if so, what they were? Or did it make it easier for you to be home during the pandemic as a faith leader?
That's not easier. Just harder to communicate because, now you have to be, instead of going to the house of someone, now you have to, not personally be with them, but on the phone. And I guess a stressor would be that you can't touch them now. You can't really touch people or, in the faith-based world, we're huggers. That's our consoling type thing when you're dealing with people. And so that was a big pivot. So now you're talking to people, but you can't communicate like you did before. So you have to find other ways, to bring the comfort or, make somebody feel calm or whatever it is that you're doing through the pandemic. And we had to learn social media, how to get on that. Social media, that's been we started one place and then we had to move to another, because you get a lot of feedback on these social media things. And when you're trying to communicate and people are talking and the baby crying, and so they were big pivots. But I think as we kept going, we kind of got a even place where it's working out a lot better now. Learning the social media, learning what you have, like on Zoom, how to control it, how to put people on mute, those type of things were challenging. But you learn how to work through them, as you learn it and go through the tutorials and learn how to use this social media. It makes it a little easier. But still it's a challenge, but we do get through it.
And Mr. Twyne, Mr. Lamont, how about you we know that you're a very aggressive outreach leader, working with the Salvation Army and various entities within the community. How has it been, good for you, challenging for you, or what type of pivots or maybe wins that you've gotten out of the pandemic? Because some folks say they've gotten some wins.
From my personal standpoint, it was very challenging and very hard to reach out to the community as a community leader. A lot of people are still not computer savvy. So with me reaching out to the community by emailing them, a lot of people are not trained in that area with technology, and it was very hard for me to reach out to the people with resources such as issuing them a gift card or telling them about where they get food via email. So I was texting them, and they was having a difficult time with that as well, receiving the text and trying to text back, especially the seniors. I have 573 constituents in my area as a committee man, community leader, and it was hard with reaching some of the seniors. So we would sometime go door to door to distribute food to the seniors from my personal standpoint. But professionally, from a small business standpoint, it was tough because when the city shut down, it like totally destroyed the catering business. Everything was canceled, weddings and birthdays and baby showers. It was like, wow, what in the world are we going to do? So when you write a business plan, you have to write a backup plan. And my backup plan was cleaning your restaurant. We can't serve no food, but we can clean a restaurant. So that kept some of my guys gainfully employed. And I'd never cleaned bathrooms like that in my life. But I had to really get to the muscle and get down and clean the bathroom and clean behind the taller bowls and be Mr. Clean and get the job done. So that's what we did from my business standpoint. We got into some of these businesses and helped clean these businesses.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we've talked to other people who have had opportunities, such as you, Jeffrey, talking about how your porch had to become your host site, right?
Correct.
And you online, Shesheena and Pastor Evon, being able to reach the faith community and do what we normally do in terms of church differently, but nevertheless, life still had to go on. Another conversation we wanted to talk about is having you all work with residents. What types of stressors and changes have you seen within the community from a mental health perspective, or just keeping hope alive, or getting depressed? What kind of things have you noticed that the community has experienced? Pastor Evon, I'll start with you.
Just a lot of people stressed, on edge, not knowing where to go for things. It's been pretty tough. It's been pretty tough. But I think we're very resilient, and people do find a way. They do find a way how to get food, how to distribute the food. But it's been stressful. It's been stressful, I think, for just everybody. I don't think anybody can say that they weren't stressed through this pandemic. But, you know, through the Zoom, there have been a lot of Zooms on mental health and how to stay mentally healthy. There's been a lot of stuff out there online that's been keeping people kind of evenly, keeping things afloat, I should say, mentally. So it's a lot of stuff out there online, and the people that might not be online, just people, sometimes you can go on the porch and talk to people, you know, our neighbors, you know, you can talk from the porch. And that was helping people not, oh, we're in the house, we're lonely. So you got on the porch, you know, at some point and talk to the people. So you had to find ways to help the community de-stress.
And what about you, Jeffrey? What have you noticed within the community? From folks.
Thank you. One thing I've noticed is that as it became more real, that the people began to affect the people and began to get more stressed out. And it's almost like it started off, I can't do this. This is getting bad. Now, how long will it last? And okay, I got this under control. And it's just different mindsets as the time went by, according to how real it was. At the beginning, no one knew anyone who had been sick, or no one knew anyone who had passed away. But then as it became more real and they got greater knowledge of people who had been affected by it, then they began to get more stressed, and their whole attitude about the pandemic began to change.
Yeah, and I know, Shesheena, from being in the community, we realized that, you know, in the community where it's primarily black and brown people, there was different stressors around, you know, access to information, and also the credibility of the information that was being transmitted into the community. Can you speak to that at all during your course of the year?
Yeah, I think what Pastor Evon said and Jeffrey speaks to can tie into that, in that, one, there are a lot of entry points. We're all living under the same condition, right? We're all experiencing the same type of traumatic stress, right? But we all are going to respond to it in different ways. And so for some people, it was about the information, right? For some people, is this correct? How do we know, right? Well, other people were dealing with that negotiation between isolation and also the need for navigating their safety. Like, I want to be in community, I want to connect with people, but I'm also really scared. And so there are a lot of different entry points into the same experience, as Jeffrey referenced. There are also different phases. A lot of us came into our understanding at different places in this conversation, in terms of, some people were more comfortable at onset, and then things started to become more intensified for them. While other people, initially, it was a shock to their system, and they went through the traumatic stress. They felt themselves in fight, flight. They hunkered down. They did those things to make them feel safe, and then gradually came back to some normalcy. And then other people ebbed and flowed. And however you showed up in that, it's okay, because again, it's all traumatic stress, right? It's all of us naturally responding to traumatic stress. And so I think the beautiful thing is that was also named here is that even while all of that was happening, there were other things that were also happening. People learning how to reconnect with their communities, people learning how to talk to their neighbors in new ways, people innovating in ways in which we haven't seen in a very long time, people finding new ways to take care of themselves. I know we're going to talk about self-care in a little bit, but going to the spa was my thing. That was a part of my self-care. That's a part of what I used to help me manage stress. And that was out the window. And so I, like many other people, had to pivot. What are we going to do differently now in this moment? And I think having an opportunity to slow down, even if we didn't want to slow down, but to recognize, okay, I can slow down and I can choose, is something that's really powerful. So lots of different entry points into it, but I think being able to still recognize the beautiful things that have also been happening, I think, is a part of how we move into the next phase, because we're still in it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, yeah. And Mr. Lamont, we also recognize the fact that your community work includes the community, and some of that is our residents that may be unhoused. Can maybe you speak a little bit to, what you've heard or observed from, being in that environment, and how folks have been faring in that space?
Yes, and we talk in terms of people being unhoused. It was very difficult for me to do my job to the best of my ability during this pandemic, with people not being housed from a fire or a disaster, or homeless people, or people basically out here dealing with a mental health crisis. It was very chaotic. And with me trying to deal with that, with the limited resources that I had, with the city government being shut down, the city and the state was not properly prepared to handle such a thing in this magnitude. And everybody was caught by guard, not knowing how to deal with this. And it was very difficult for me to direct the people to the different resources that could better help them, for us with renter's assistance or somewhere to go, because it was just so many restrictions, and it was like the whole country was on lockdown, like he was incarcerated. So what we did have to reach out to was the basic necessities, such as these food cupboards and these food pantries where people can go and get basic necessities. If we didn't have that, I don't know what this city of Philadelphia would have been, and what it would have been like, with basic things such as food and toiletries. And community partnerships was a big help. And that really showed me a lot with these community partnerships, how we came together as community leaders and community partnerships, waiting on the city and the state we would have been totally wiped out.
Thank you, Mr. Lamont. Yes, yes, yes. Those community partnerships and using our resources from within were a powerful transition that we made. We knew we had it in us, but this made us, we had to really prove it, right? Yeah, it was when the pedal hit the metal, right?
Yes.
Maybe we could talk a little bit too about as you found yourself having to pivot and readjust and be creative, what things did you do personally? Shesheena talked a little bit about, I'm thinking some type of alternative spa moments, but what other things did you do to take care of yourself? Because, you know, especially as providers and folks that help our pilots and co-pilots and leaders, what did you do to take care of yourself? Because a lot of times we, what do they say? You have to put the mask on yourself first.
Yes.
That's an ironic statement, right, with us all having masks on now. Jeffrey, what did you do for yourself?
Yeah, I have 3 sisters
Okay.
and a brother, and none of them live in the Philadelphia area. All of them are out of state. Prior to COVID, we might talk once every other week. Since everything shut down, I have spoke to a sister or brother every day.
Wow.
We're on the phone, we're texting, we're acting stupid, we're laughing, we're reminiscing about childhood days. And if I don't get that phone call, then I have trouble making it through the next day. And I will call my sister and say, why didn't you answer my phone call? And I think it is healing for me and healing for her as well as we continue to communicate with each other. And we do it every day. Because of Zoom, we all attend different churches. But because of Zoom, we all attend the same churches. Me and my sisters all attend the same church at the same time. And so just connecting with the family during this time has been a lot of my self-care.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. What about you, Mr. Lamont? What about your self-care during this period?
My self-care during this period was listening to gospel music. Every praise was to my God, and every little worship. That was my self-healing process, trying to clear my mind, and the gospel music really opened my mind up, hearing them different musicians play that music. And secondly, my eldest brother, he came up with this great idea of dual. Zoom and dual is 2 different things. So my oldest brother came up with dual, and we was on that phone with the family from California, Virginia, New York, wherever. So we got on the phone and did the dual, and we communicate with each other and talked, and people was asking for my pound cake recipe, and I refused to give it to them. But that's what we did. We got on the phone and we did dual because people was having a difficult time with using the Zoom and using social media. The elderly seniors cannot do that Facebook and text and all kind of stuff like that. But my mother was able to use the dual, and we was talking to my brother in California. He was in the Navy for 18 years. So that's what we did.
Awesome, thank you. We're going to go to Shesheena, who is our trauma expert for today. Maybe you have some other questions or thoughts around self-care. I'm sure that Pastor Evon needed to self-care in some ways, but Shesheena, what about your thoughts around self-caring during this pandemic?
Yeah. Well, one, I can't help but to feel like this is an important moment to insert a very important life lesson, or one of the many amazing downloads that I've learned from Dr. Clara Whaley Perkins around stress management and self-care, right? And so one of the things that she helped to illuminate in our work together is understanding the difference, and that a lot of what we need to be focused on is stress management. What are the things that we are doing on a day in and day out basis that we're saying is particularly targeted towards our stressors? And if we're intentional about that, we can become better at taking care of ourselves, which can change how we do self-care. Self-care is great, it's nice, but also a part of that self-care, if we can't get to the spa, which is fun, if we can't get to the retreats, which we know we couldn't travel, if you can't do those things, we still have stress. So what do you do to help you manage your stress? How do you notice your stress? How do you name it? And what are the things that you should be doing for it? So I wanted to make sure I said that, because that's a really important part of our conversations around wellness, is managing our stress. I also just had a question for my fellow panelists. I know that we're all leaders in our own capacities, and so oftentimes when big change happens, we roll with it. We're like, all right, what do I need to do? How do I step into place? What's next? But it doesn't mean we're not impacted. It doesn't mean we don't feel. And so I'm curious to hear from you all, if any of you would like to share what it was like to have to consider, how is this pandemic impacting my role, right? How people see me, how I see myself as a leader. I'm curious if anyone wants to share about that, what that was like.
Pastor Evon, would you like to share?
Yeah. Well, I kind of like, when I needed to be who I am, I did. And when I needed to back off, I did that too.
Yeah.
I learned it. At first, I was trying to be the be-all thing. But then as you start feeling the stress on your body and in your mind, you had to say, okay, I can't do this, you know. So I had to come up with different ways. One time I had to actually go to the hotel for the weekend and just do me.
Yes.
Amen.
And the hotels were cheap because it was the pandemic.
Yes, it was.
So, I mean, you go for the whole weekend. So I went for the whole weekend one time. I told my daughter-in-law, give me a hotel. I got to go, you know, because I was feeling it. So I had to make a decision for me. Even though I had things that needed to happen, they didn't happen because I had to do me.
Yeah.
So you have to make decisions as a leader to when it's too much for you. And you got to realize that. You got to tell everybody, you know, call 911. I'm going away for the weekend, you know. And so I did that. I went away, and it was great. It helped me a lot. When I came back, I was ready. What we got to do? Where we going? What's up? You know, but I needed that time because there was a lot of funerals. And, I mean, it was stressful. And then when it gets closer, when it was far away, I think it was okay. But then when it started coming close, you felt that, you know, like when it's the neighbor up the street or your cousin, you know, it got like, this is real. And so you have to take that time. You have to take that time and just shut down and help you put your own thing on so you can be okay. And be okay with that, too. Because sometimes we be like, oh, maybe I should have. No, you got to be okay with it.
I feel that my role has sort of evolved and completely changed. And at the beginning of the pandemic, my question was, what is my role? In fact, it's no secret, it's my job. And I actually, at the beginning, said to my supervisor, I don't know if there's enough work out there for me to do to get in the hours that need to be done. That quickly answered my question, and quickly I realized that, yes, it's a different job, but it was an important job to do. When you were talking about taking care of, I have a 3-year-old Bichon Poodle. His name is Justice. And Justice is how I take care of myself. Justice is used to climbing up on the couch with me, snuggling with me, and just saying, okay, calm down, everything's going to be okay.
I also wanted to maybe ask Shesheena and everybody else, like, I think, Pastor, you brought it up, that there was so much death in our communities. And I think you described it so eloquently, Pastor Evon. It was one thing when it was out here, but when that million people started getting closer and closer and closer, yeah, it seemed to be a space where death was overtaking us. What were your thoughts around that, Shesheena, as a trauma expert?
Yeah. So I think, you know, in hearing this, what I'm most honed in on is we talked about the deaths, right? We recognize people, physical bodies no longer being here as a loss. But there are other deaths outside of the loss of people. And it doesn't minimize at all losing people, but just to also name that many of us went through other losses, many deaths. And so we lost perhaps a role. We used to see ourselves one way, and now we can't show up in the world in this way. We lost structures. We've lost money, right? We've lost family. We've lost institutions. We've lost ideas about how things should be. And with any loss, it requires opportunity for mourning. And so that to me has been the other really essential thing around loss in this time, is making sure that we're mourning all of our losses. And so, you know, I still think we're in mourning as a larger community. I don't think we're out of it. I think we are still in it and paying attention to what it means to mourn. When we're mourning, we're tender, right? We need to be gentle with ourselves. We need to slow down. And so keeping that in mind in our day-to-day world, even as the world opens up, even as we transition into new things, that we still need to be gentle with ourselves. We still need to be tender. We're still nursing the wounds of many losses throughout this year, including losing people. And so, yeah, being really gentle with ourselves, I think, is important right now as we acknowledge that this is different and we have lost some people.
I mean, I think the word acknowledgement and honoring also is
For
such
sure.
a powerful
For sure.
statement. Because we do tend to just roll through things and we're just on to the next thing, like the other thing didn't happen.
Yes.
But how do we think about ways to honor this year of what challenges, pivots, and now looking towards maybe recovery? So I want to just turn over this space to you, Shesheena, with our panelists to discuss, what are some of the big takeaways from this year, and also maybe some strategies or ideas around recovery for us as individuals and also for community.
I'll actually defer to one of the other panelists to start, and then I can kind of chime in because I'm really curious to hear about your takeaways from.
Yeah, I'll start with you, Mr. Lamont, in terms of your takeaways from the pandemic, and also how do you see in a personal space and also a community collective space around recovery?
If I can start from the very bottom, as far as with recovery, we never really can fully recover if we don't have a plan in place. We have to have a plan in place to really fully recover. So I believe that it's going to take approximately 10 years to fully recover from this pandemic. A lot of your city agencies and state agencies was not fully prepared to handle such a crisis such as this. So people are never really going to fully recover. You never fully recover after something like this. It takes time. And we cannot do it tomorrow, we can't do it yesterday, and we can't do it next year. It takes a long time to recover from something like this. And years ago, when I was working for the city of Philadelphia, they always constantly trained us in mass casualties. So it pretty much prepared me to be able to deal with this, but I know that my community could not really properly deal with this. So with the different level of training that I got from the City of Philadelphia Fire Department for being there 15 years had trained me to deal with mass casualties, because we got so much training. What if a plane crashes down at the airport with 700 people in there? Who do you take care of first? People that can get up and walk away, or people that's having a heart attack? So you got to know who to deal with first. And I hope that this becomes a learning experience to all your agencies to have a better plan in place for something like this. And it becomes an eye-opener.
Pastor Evon.
I
your
agree.
thoughts
I
on that?
agree. I agree. A takeaway is to plan better, prepare our people better. Um, we might, when the pandemic happened, you kind of learned that, like a pastor or a leader, how you lead people, how you train, that when something like that happened, that maybe we could have did something better. You know, you think about to prepare people in such instances. I don't know if we didn't know this was going to happen, but the way the people reacted, I guess, you kind of, maybe if I would have, we would have trained better or taught in certain areas better, had plans in place. I think that's a good takeaway of how to prepare the people in advance. Because it wasn't like people didn't say, some people did say, especially in the faith community, to prepare ourselves, get water, put away some extra food. Like, that was communicated. But a lot of times, I guess we didn't really take it as serious as we could have, so we didn't. But right before the pandemic, Prophet did tell us to prepare, get some water, put some extra stuff away. And we had just right before it hit in February, had started doing that because we were responsible for a lot of people. So we did we could have had done it better, but kind of the planning and listening and not thinking that, oh, that can't happen to us, but to really begin to plan differently, I think that was a big takeaway for the faith-based community.
Cass, can I add to that?
Yeah, please.
We everyone talks about going back to where it used to be, going back to normal, and they speak of the pandemic as this evil thing. But life wasn't that good before the pandemic either. And so one thing that the pandemic has given us is an opportunity to start to imagine what life can be like after the pandemic. It's almost as if the slate has been wiped clean and we can start over. And some of the good things that I've seen come out the pandemic is caring for your neighbor.
Amen.
Leaders taking charge and doing the right thing. People not being as selfish, but people not hoarding and trying to make their own richness off of it. Families growing closer. All these things were some of the good things that I hope we don't forget after the pandemic, but we take from the pandemic and carry it into what will be the new normal.
It's interesting, Jeffrey, because that's exactly where I was going. Because what I hear you speaking to is hope, right? And so now that there's been a vaccine, to many this vaccine represents a path towards hope, an opportunity to restore some type of normalcy, right? We know we have been changed and will forever be changed, but hope is really important. And so I'm curious, and this might be your point, or it might be something else you want to add here, but I would love for each of the panelists to just name something for our audience. What is something that has brought you hope during this time period?
I'll start, I guess. Seeing all the volunteers. Seeing all the volunteers not letting anyone go without. Everyone had, because the neighbors made sure everyone had what they needed.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, Pastor Yvonne, and even like at times there was a surplus.
Yeah.
There was an abundance. We noticed that there was an abundance, which appeared out of, it's kind of like you said, Jeffrey, if we could do this during a pandemic, imagine what we could do when there's not a pandemic, right? Pastor Yvonne, what about you?
It was so much food I went out yesterday, like early in the morning, like 8 o'clock, and I saw trucks just loading pallets and pallets of food all over the whole city. We went by one place, they had milk and eggs. They had a sign out. We got milk and eggs. And the people were going over. If we could do that, I mean, it was like a sea of food. Nobody was starving. Nobody was hungry. And you didn't have to go to the supermarket. It was on the streets, lined up with food for the people. Healthy foods, fruits and vegetables. You know, before the pandemic, you really had to search for some fruit and vegetables. It was everywhere. It was beautiful. That was beautiful. And all the volunteers, people were volunteering, you know, people I didn't even know lived around in the community were all around just helping. People just, you know, pulling you to the side, bringing the cars over, you know, not making you feel bad, you know, because you're getting a handout, but it was for everybody. It wasn't like, oh, you know, you poor, you rich. It was like whoever wanted it, you could have it. That was beautiful.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, Mr. Lamont?
Yes, if I can speak on that as well, the key word is distribution. The food distribution was like outstanding. However, I think that our military, our National Guard for Pennsylvania wasn't effective enough for me. If I was the governor, I would have did a better job with dispatching the National Guard to get them more involved with distribution. We had a lot of volunteers, but we have to do a better job with our Pennsylvania National Guard. We're getting these service men and women to get out here to help in the communities in Pennsylvania. If they can bring the National Guards out here during a riot, they can dispatch 20,000 National Guard troops to guard the shop right in the Pack Market and Walmart. They most definitely can dispatch them out here to help with this pandemic.
So what it sounds like, Ms. Lamont, is your hope is that the state would consider some things differently. Yeah. I thought it is important that we end there with hope, because it is having something to look forward to is essential to the human condition, right? It is not good for us to live in constant stress, constant deprivation. And so having something to look forward to, having something to seek out, whether it's a vacation, whether it's the idea that we can do more of this at other times, the idea that, you know, we're better, we're a little bit stronger, we're a little bit more connected, we know a little bit more because of our experiences, is a part of what carries us forward as a community. So I just want to encourage people to keep finding points of hope, even if it's in something very small, right? We know clearly that our larger systems have a ways to go, but I think something that was named on this panel really beautifully is that what a lot of what's been happening locally, from individual to individual, household to household, community to community, has really been effective for helping us to hold down our community during this pandemic.
Well, thank you all. I thought this was an amazing conversation. We just are happy to be again here for our 5th session of UnPACK. And just some context of UnPACK. This forum was put together as a way in response to how do we continue to communicate with community, and how do we pivot, how do we get through our challenges, and how do we kind of name and honor this space with our community leaders, our community residents, and even, we're happy to say, our youth. So we are going to wrap up this portion of UnPACK for today. I'd like to thank our sponsors, which is Life After Trauma Organization, PC Live Coalition, Roses Clubhouse, Black Voters Matters, Mill Creek Community Partnership, and we are here at the local Community Education Center, which we so appreciate their support in this project. So we're going to take a brief intermission. We thank you all. Mr. Lamont Twyne, thank you for being with us here today.
Thank you for having me.
Pastor Evon DeLee,
My pleasure.
you got the power pack right here today.
Amen.
Jeffrey Jordan,
Amen.
and Shesheena Bray. So we're going to just take a short intermission, And we'll be right back with our youth panel because we definitely want them to have an opportunity to unpack and give us their word and their voice and honor them. So thank you again. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to our fifth session of UnPACK. We are unpacking today about COVID, year one, challenges, pivots, and recovery. So welcome back. We have our youth panel here, our UnPACK youth panel, and I'm going to start out with my furthest to the right. We're going to ask that you introduce yourself, what school, and your age. Thank you.
My name is Zion. I go to Conestoga High School and I'm 15.
My name is Dayon. I go to Slams and I am 12.
My name is Uriel. I go to West Philly High and I'm 15.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're really glad to make sure that we incorporate our youth in all our work because they're not only our future, they actually are our today. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Shesheena to center us and take us into this conversation with our youth.
Yeah. So in our adult conversation, one of the things we talked about was slowing down, and we talked about transitioning. And so this is a new conversation, and so I just want to give us a moment to actually transition into this conversation. So I want to do a quick grounding practice, and this is something that you all can do with us right now, and you can also do this in the future on your own. But grounding is a great way to come into the moment, to get out of whatever's in our head about what we did before we came into this space, to get out of our head about what we're going to do after we leave this space, and just come into this moment, okay? So I'm just going to ask everyone to I invite you to participate with me or do whatever feels most comfortable for you, okay? But if you're seated, I just invite you to go ahead and make sure your feet are planted on the ground so that you can feel the floor beneath your feet. Try to find a tall spine, allowing for as much length as possible. Try relaxing your shoulders down, your back. I invite you to close your eyes or perhaps lower your gaze, whatever feels most comfortable for your body. I invite you to place one hand over your heart and another hand over your belly. And just notice what you feel here without doing anything, without altering your breathing. Just notice your body. Notice the weight of your hands against your chest and your stomach. Notice the temperature of your hand. Notice how your belly rises to meet your hand with each inhale. And notice how it softens with every exhale. Feel the floor beneath your feet. Feel the chair supporting your body. And let's take 3 breaths together. Breathing in slowly through the nose, filling up. Exhale, release. Good, let's do that 2 more times. Breathe in and fill up like a balloon. Exhale and soften. One last time, breathing in through the nose. And let's sigh it out this time. Beautiful. As you're ready, I invite you to open your eyes or lift your gaze. Bring some movement back to your body. And return to the moment, return to the room, return to this panel. Okay. Thank you all for participating in that grounding. Yeah.
Thank you.
When you all came to sit up here, I started to smile because I really love young people. I think you're amazing. And this is a hard time to be a young person. A lot of times when we thought about the pandemic, we thought about the inconvenience that it's brought to adults. But I know you all have felt that on a much deeper level because there's so many things that are out of your control. So I'm curious to hear from you all, how has the pandemic changed your lives? What are some things that are different for you now as a result of the pandemic?
I'll go first. The pandemic changed my life because I used to get like C's on my report cards and stuff, but now I'm in honors class and I'm one of the top students in my class. So yeah.
That's congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank
That's
you.
wonderful.
That's a beautiful accomplishment.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Dayon?
So it's been quite an experience living at this moment, but I don't think there has been any changes. I'm still getting a little bit of different schooling though, and different schedules and stuff that's been happening at my school, but besides that, me staying at home has been most of a luxury for me.
It's nice to have luxury, right?
Besides the school situation, I also think that, the social aspect of not being able to see the people that you're most familiar with, your friends and family.
Thank you. I'm curious to hear from you all. This is, you have a great opportunity. You're in front of a live audience, most of which I'm assuming are adults. And so I'm curious to hear from you all. What is it that you want the adults in your community, in your life to understand about being a young person in this pandemic? What is it that you want us to better understand?
It's hard for us to like cope with this pandemic because we're used to being in school and seeing our friends and stuff. So, like, sit down and talk to us about how our day is going, but don't like bash us on like the stuff that we're doing bad because we're trying to cope with the pandemic too.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd like to expand on that a little bit. It's been quite decent, but the school stuff has been a little off. Like I said, with all the schedules and stuff, and not really hanging out with my friends a lot really changes a lot of stuff.
I think I say this about every time we have this, but I think what I would say to the adults in my life who are like helping me is that we're trying to. Like in the news and stuff, you usually see the adults like making differences, but I just want the adults in my life to know that the kids are trying to.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, historically, young people have always been at the forefront of large movements, right? When we talk about movements that have brought forward change, it wasn't the old heads. It was young people, right? And so, taking the time to intentionally listen is really important, because you all are going to do it regardless. But if we want to be a part of that, we should listen as well. Yeah. Thank you for that. What do you miss most about pre-pandemic life? What are you missing?
Go ahead, Dayon. You got the mic.
I miss most of my friends and just hanging out with them most of the time, whether it be after school and going after school programs with other people.
I would say what I miss most is like the liberties of doing things sort of like when we want to. Certain things we have to hold off on certain things, we can't do that right now because of the pandemic. So I guess the liberties of going to do things that we can't do now.
Yeah.
I miss seeing people smile because everybody is hiding under the mask and stuff like that. So when we take pictures, we can't really we have to look serious. And like when you try to smile, it's like, what's the point of even smiling? So yeah.
I literally just took a picture smiling behind my mask. So I understand. But also smiling is really good for us, right? Because it tells the body, when we smile, our body's like, we know what this is like. This is something good. And so we get those happy hormones. So sometimes it's important to bring the smile even behind the mask. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I wanted to just ask a question. Is that all right? I wanted to hear, have you all started to think about, they say things are going to open up more. What things would you like to see different when things open back up this time? What could
That's a great
happen
question.
better in the world or in your school or in your life or for you that could be better or different than before? Ariel?
More safe places for youth to hang out. Because right now we barely have any places to hang out. That's where some youth is getting in trouble now. and like we need to like have more like cleanness. Now we know like that we need to have hand sanitizer around and stuff like that, but like some places are so like messy and they need to have more organization.
Any other thoughts about, what could be different in community or personally or school-wise when, as things open back up?
I think for school, more funner activities to do, like projects and stuff like that.
So projects like, or fun activities like, you got any suggestions?
I'm not thinking anything too big, but also not anything too small. Not like just an answer sheet, you gotta answer these questions and stuff. More of a thing where we can have a partner and do something active, whether it be going outside or even doing some type of lab experiment, something like that.
I would say something that we need to change when the pandemic is over is like we have things in the world that need to be, it's an immediate thing that needs to be changed. Like we need to do something about global warming, like now and soon, and like recycling and stuff. That wasn't, people put that on the back burners usually before the pandemic, but now that we realize that there are things like life can come to a halt like it is now, then we need to like do things about it.
Thank you. These are some amazing answers. Thank you for asking that question, Ms. Cass. So what I heard was our young people are asking for safer places for them to hang out, environments that are clean and conducive to their well-being, being fun, right? But fun on purpose. I heard more innovation in our education and just making things more interactive in our education and paying attention to the big issues, right? Paying attention to these global things and not waiting for tragedy, right? Before we collectively start paying attention and noticing. I think those are really, really important, yeah. And kind of staying in this vein of thinking about the future, I'm curious, how are you thinking about the future? How you think about the future changed at all as a result of the pandemic?
No. I still think we're gonna like overcome all this, but for me the future hasn't changed. Like I asked all my friends like what do they want to be when they grow up. Everybody says the same thing that I asked like 2 years ago. So nothing is really gonna change in the future. Like stuff is gonna be like more serious. Like we're gonna take our president stuff more serious, and I hope police brutality change and stuff, and Black Lives Matter change, and Asian hate change. But BTW, nothing's really gonna change in the future.
I think when the pandemic's over, more likely we'll be more grateful and our priorities will change into more active stuff so stuff like this doesn't happen again, or we just make sure we won't get in this type of incident again.
I think that in the future, people have to start making a change. For me, I think my plans have drastically changed for the future. I mean, I had this whole plan for college, but it has definitely drastically changed now that I understand that things can stop and they will stop and you can't really do anything about it.
Yeah. Thank you all for sharing that. I would just say as our last question, I think we should end the same way we ended our adult panel, which is on the topic of hope, right? Hope is a necessary part of the human condition. It's a part of what motivates us and keeps us going. And so I would love to hear from each of you, and Ms. Cass, because I know you kind of mentioned it before, but I would love for you to think about this as well. What is something that has brought you hope during this pandemic that you can share with the larger community? And whenever you have it, you can start.
Hope means to me that we can conquer all this. And something that brought me hope is actually the Zooms, like the app Zoom, because even though I couldn't see like my grandparents or like my grandma before she like passed away, I could still talk to her before she passed away on Zoom and said my last goodbyes to her.
Yeah. Give thanks. I'm glad you had that moment.
Hope-wise, I would say that still seeing, well, we can't see everybody, family-wise, we can't see everyone if they live like certain distances away. But just seeing that certain family will come and see you and that they still have your back and knowing that somebody still has your back, I think that's the most important thing.
Damn,
It's
you got
hope
any
is
thoughts?
that we've had reflecting on most of the stuff like Asian hate or the nearest president and even woman, which is a big thing to reflect on at this time, which we should have, which everyone has had a lot of time to do, and we've been trying to do that stuff on Unpacked a little bit recently, like with the woman stuff and etc.
Yeah, I mean, this is it's such a beautiful way to end March for me, because it is a year since the pandemic started. And what gives me hope is to see the power of people of all ages and races and economic backgrounds, and that a good friend of mine told me years ago when I first got involved in community engagement and development that the darkness could never overtake the light. And it feels like we're at that moment where the darkness did not overtake our light, and we are still rising. And just seeing people protesting and the abundance of food and people coming out of their normals and the possibilities, the endless possibilities of what's next and how we can do things different as we come out of a broken system, and the light that is going to come from this experience. So I'm super hopeful and excited and loving the fact that, I believe the youth are going to do some incredible things immediately. They don't have to wait.
Thank you. Hearing all of those things offers me hope. I do very heavy work every day, and hearing those points, those glimmers of light, especially from young people, and especially from people who could be jaded or burnt out by this work, to find hope offers me hope. So thank you all for that.
Thank you. So all of you who have joined us live and whoever's viewing this after Sunday, March 28th at the Community Education Center, we'd just like to give a time of gratitude to all our panelists over the last few months and especially today. We'd like to honor and give light unto Life After Trauma organization who agreed to embark on this endeavor with us. They do other endeavors throughout the community, but really take a chance to say, how can we just not move through the process of day-to-day news and situations, but how we can work together collectively to unpack and have conversations that we can release and share some of the weight collectively and move past things, and also glean and learn from each other. So we'd like to thank our sponsors again, Life After Trauma organization, LATO. You can reach out to them on social media and the internet. We have PC Live Coalition. We thank them for their creativeness and their willingness to be on the front line 365 days a year. And we'd like to give honor to Mill Creek Community Partnership, which is bigger than Mill Creek. It is citywide, and that the board and all those involved were willing to take a chance on this. We want to give a shout out to our technical team, Community Education Center, and all our sponsors, and we look forward to seeing you the second Sunday in April, and we'll be unpacking again. So we thank you for your time. We wish you well. You be safe, take care, and be blessed. Hope is alive. Thank you. Good afternoon.